So, there was a question before about why do some airlines go bankrupt and why are some airlines successful. Remember that there were only 22 airlines, or 28, sorry, airlines between 2012 and 2019 who generated a good profit. Only 28 out of the list of 122 airlines in total. And what was common in there, all the airlines were big. So economies of scale are very important. The larger your airline is, the better conditions you can have. If you are buying 1 million liters of fuel, or you buy 100 million liters of fuel, you will get a better price for 100 million than for 1 million. If you are Lion Air and you order 200 Airbuses at once, you get a better price than if you are a small airline and only order 5. So the bigger you are, the lower your variable costs are, because you can negotiate well. The same thing is for your overhead. A small company has small airline with 5 aircraft, needs 1 CFO, 1 CEO, 1 quality manager, 1 head of finance, maybe an accounting department of 10. But if you are much bigger, you also only need 1 CEO. You probably need to pay him or her more, but you have economies of scale, because your fixed costs can be spread over a bigger output. Do you get that? Economies of scale? Very, very important. That's why it's so difficult as a startup. If you start with 2 aircraft, 5 aircraft, it will be very difficult to survive in the beginning, because you don't have any economies of scale. Second economy is economies of scope. And what are economies of scope? It's with the same production, you can do something else. If you look at the post office, before they were sending letters, they had a coverage over the whole of Indonesian Post, but you can also use parcels. They can use the same distribution network to distribute parcels. These are economies of scope. With airlines, it's exactly the same. If you transport passengers, at the belly of the aircraft, you can put baggage. But you can also put cargo. If you look at wide-body aircraft, if everyone has 1 suitcase, you still have half of your cargo available for sale. If you know that price between China and Europe is about $3 a kilogram, a 787, apart from the suitcases, can take about 20 tons of cargo. So $3 times 20 tons is $60,000 additional revenue just by cargo. So that's quite important. So economies of scope, with the same production machinery, you can produce another product, like transporting cargo. And last but not least, you also have the economies of density, which is very important in the airline industry, is that if you fly to more destinations, you can connect more to other destinations. There's a specific course later this week about network, and there you will see that by adding 1 destination, you can certainly link up that 1 destination with many more destinations. Suppose you're an airline based in Jakarta and you fly to 10 destinations within Indonesia, but you don't fly to Banda Aceh yet. You suddenly start flying to Banda Aceh, then you can connect Banda Aceh with Jakarta. But if you also fly Jakarta to Bali, you can connect Banda Aceh with Bali to Jakarta. So economies of density are very, very important. This shows again, the bigger your airline is, the more connections you can get. The bigger your airline is, as well, the higher your density is, the more attractive you can become to customers. Because they say, oh, I booked that airline, because they fly almost everywhere. So the cocktail of success is a combination of economies of scale, economies of scope, and economies of density. This is the combination of these 3, and then you will be successful. And you see that 28 airlines have shown with a good profit happen to be also one of the largest airlines. And that's what you see, is that only the largest airlines will probably survive. The small ones will probably fade, unless if they have a value proposition that makes them so different that people say, oh, I don't want to fly that big airline, I will fly the small airline. Because they are so much better, because they focus on a specific group. In Indonesia, if you look at the landscape, for instance, Pelita Air, I don't know how many aircraft they have, 10, 15, 20, I don't know. I mean, it's too small. They cannot compete. And the same with, what's it, Transnusa? You were saying Transnusa? I don't know how many aircraft they have, but it's too small. So this means in Indonesia, you probably move to a kind of duopoly. You have the Garuda group, with Garuda Indonesia and Citylink, and you have the Lion group with Lion Air, with Batik, with Super Agent, and maybe some foreign brands. Scale, scope, density. And here in Indonesia, the scope is not too important for domestic, because cargo is not so much used on board of the aircraft. I still don't understand why. It's very much focused on passengers. Next slide, please. So if you look at your value proposition, and this may be a little bit of a complicated slide, you see the value proposition is in the middle. And basically, you have your costs and you have your revenues. In order to be successful, you need to try to minimize your costs and maximize your revenues. Because your profit is revenue minus cost. So that's normally the way how you are running your company. So if you look at costs, it's clear that if you have economies of scale, your cost will be lower, because your fixed costs can be spread over a bigger output. And in addition, because you're large, you can have better purchasing conditions. If you look at the revenues, their economies of density and economies of scope play very well. The more density you have, the bigger network you have, the more connections you can provide, the higher your connectivity, the higher your attractiveness to customers, maybe the higher the willingness to pay will be. If you're a businessman and you need to fly to a destination, then it is better you have frequency. If you fly only once a day, business people will not fly your airline, because you cannot be there and back in the same day. This Wednesday, my colleague will take over. I have to fly to Yogyakarta. I was checking on the scheme, and I saw that Citylink has the biggest frequency, largest frequency. So I booked Citylink, because then I can go in the morning and go back in the afternoon. If I fly Transnusa, I think we only had one flight somewhere at 10 o'clock or something in the morning, which means I arrive at 11 in Yogyakarta. It's too late, and I have to go back, I think, around 4. So that didn't match. So if you have frequency, so if you have density, you can ask a higher price. So I fly Citylink, which was the highest, most expensive one, but they had the highest frequency. I have a meeting there at 9, so if my meeting is finished on time, I can maybe take the 12 o'clock flight, or I can take the flight at 3 o'clock. Density is very important, and also scope, especially for long-haul flights. If you can have cargo or do something else, or like some low-cost carriers are doing, they are doing lots of ancillary revenues. Means, do you need a car? Do you need a pickup from the airport? Do you need a hotel? Do you want a seat, emergency exit seat? Do you want a meal on board? This is also economies of scope. With your same production, you can just sell additional revenues. So economies of scope and density are important from the revenue side. Your economies of scale are important from the cost side. And your value proposition determines, of course, your cost and your revenues. If your value proposition is to be the lowest cost, then your cost will be low, but your revenue will probably be low. Logic. Because if you are supplying a low-cost product, you must minimize your cost, but the willingness to pay from these customers will not be as high as you fly a full-service airline. So it will also have an impact on the revenues. Do you get that? Yeah? Okay. Next slide, please. This is the business model canvas. I'm not sure if you can read it. This is a typical way how we are explaining what the business model is. And then in a second, we're going to fill out all the boxes in this value, in this business model canvas. When you have filled out all the boxes, you have determined all the features of your business model. In the exercise this afternoon, for the airline you have to create, you also have to make a decision on all these boxes when you make your business model. Let's just dive in to the boxes now. Can you have the next slide, please? And you see the business model canvas. It focuses on the left-hand side, how do you deliver your value, which focuses more on the cost side. How do you create value? And you focus a bit more on the revenue side. And how do you capture value? Focus more on the financial side of it. So there's a certain logic in the boxes. If you focus on it later this afternoon, you will see the logic. But let me first explain the content of these boxes. If I can have the next slide. The first one is very important, and it's the heart of the airline. It's also in the middle of the business model canvas, and it's a value proposition. I've already said it a few times, but it explains what kind of airline do you want to be. Do you want to have a full service airline, or you want to be low cost? You want to be kind of Garuda Indonesia, where you have a meal on board and you don't have to pay for the seats, and you have a smiling cabin crew. You most of the time depart on time. Or you want to have low cost. You don't pay a lot. You don't get much. You want a meal, you pay for it. You want to have a good seat, you pay for it. You want a suitcase, you pay for it. And maybe you have a bit of a delay as well. So these are the typical two extremes. Garuda versus Lion Air. In Europe, Swiss Airlines or Ryanair. In the United States, Delta Airlines or Spirit. This is the typical range of full service versus low cost. That's the first one. What kind of airline do I want to be? Second part is that's the network. And that's also important because the choice of value proposition determines the network. What you will see is that low-cost carriers, normally they don't connect. They mainly sell point-to-point. In Indonesia, not always, but generally in the world, low-cost carriers only sell point-to-point. Because transfer is expensive. If one flight is delayed and the other one is not delayed, you have to care for the passengers. In Europe, if you have a delay of over 3 hours, the airline has to pay you between 250 and 600 euro if you have a delay. If your flight is cancelled, the airline has to pay you between 250 and 600 euro. Students love it if you have a delay because they get money. Cash on your bank account next day. If you miss your connection and it's their fault, then you get the money. So many European and American airlines are very scared to connect. Only if you're a full service airline they do it. Low cost airlines normally don't connect. I know here in Indonesia sometimes you see you can connect with Lion Air or with Citylink. So you have to choose your network. Do you focus domestically? Do you go regionally outside the country, or do you go internationally? Really fly long haul intercontinental. And if you fly long haul intercontinental, do you have a feeder network to feed your flights? Like Garuda Indonesia, they fly to Tokyo, for instance. They fly to Hong Kong. Not only people from Jakarta, but they also fly from Bali to Jakarta and connect from there to Japan or to Hong Kong. Or they fly from Medan to Jakarta and connect from there onto their long-haul flights. So the choice of what type of airline you want to be also determines the network you want to go. Do you want to go for frequency or you go for load factor? Low-cost airlines want to have every seat filled. And they don't want to fly a lot, but as long as the seats are filled, that's fine. If you're a full-service airline, you need frequency. You need to have at least a morning flight and an evening flight. That the business passengers who have a high willingness to pay take a morning flight out and the evening, or ideally an afternoon and an evening flight back. So you have to make the choice. Or you go for frequency, you have a lower load factor, where you can charge more for your tickets. Or you have a... Do you get that, Alena? Or do I need to repeat that? You get that? No? Yes? Yes? At the smart side there. Very complicated fare structure, and once again, we do not talk about Indonesia, because Indonesia is an exception. Normally, if you book last minute, all over the world, it's very expensive. Because it means that you're probably a businessman, you have a high willingness to pay. If I book a flight from London to Madrid for tomorrow, I probably pay about €1,000 the day before. If I book 6 months before, I probably pay only €50 for that flight. Because if I book 6 months before, I'm probably a tourist with a low willingness to pay. If I'm with someone who wants to fly out on a Thursday and go back on a Sunday evening, then I'm not a businessman because I stay there in the weekends. So this fare structure is a complicated fare structure and really looks, my colleague Dr. Sven will talk a bit more about, really looks at your willingness to pay. What type of customer are you? Are you a tourist? Yes, probably, because you stay a weekend, because you book a long time in advance, you're probably a tourist. Or you book the same week, then you probably have, you need to be there urgent, otherwise you wouldn't book. Like I booked my CityLink flight yesterday night to fly on a Wednesday. I probably had a high willingness to pay. I didn't pay a lot because of that stupid minimum and maximum fare rule which we have here in Indonesia. By having a minimum price, you avoid, you have seats flying empty, and Lion Air is almost as expensive as Garuda. That doesn't make any sense because Garuda should be more expensive and Lion Air should be cheaper. The same, I booked yesterday for a flight for Wednesday, so I probably have a high willingness to pay. I easily wanted to pay double for that because I have to be there and visit another university there. Not as nice as Trisakti, I think, but I have to go to another university. I probably wanted to pay double or triple, but because of that maximum pay, I paid a low fare. So it doesn't make any sense to make a businessman pay less than he wants to pay. It doesn't make any sense to have a minimum price in order that people who have a lower willingness to pay certainly cannot fly. So your fare structure is also important. And what you see in Europe, the full-service airlines, they charge very high prices for last-minute travel. If you look at low-cost airlines, they do more or less the same, but they have a much simpler fare structure. Because most of the time, they are focusing the low-cost travelers anyway, who have a low willingness to pay. Can I have the next slide, please? Product. Also important, what type of product you want to give. You want to give a very simple product, like Lion Air does. No frills, you pay extra for your hand luggage, you pay extra for your luggage, you pay extra for a meal, you pay extra for a seat, you pay extra for early boarding or whatever, or you want to give the passengers a full fare. Everything included. I know the government changed the rule, something with the suitcase. You have to pay for a suitcase or not now? In Indonesia, you know? You don't know? Okay, I will have to look at that then. But normally, the government should not intervene in the fact that you should buy a suitcase. It's up to the airline to decide if they want to include the suitcase in the product or not. And if you don't include it, like Ryanair, you have to pay extra for a suitcase. So the product is also very important. And if you're a full-service airline, you can also offer business class. Look at Garuda, they have a very nice business class with a high willingness to pay, which looks very good. Lion Air, they don't have a business class. Lion Group, they also have a full-service airline, Batik, they have a business class. And they have free meals on board. So it depends on your product. It must be consistent with your network. It must be consistent with your business model. You can also decide on partnerships. Do you want to do interline with another company? Like work together. Yesterday, I actually flew from Bangkok to Jakarta. I saw Garuda, Indonesia, were code sharing with Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines doesn't fly to Jakarta, but they fly to Bangkok. So you can buy a ticket from Ethiopia to Jakarta. The first part you fly with the first part you fly with Ethiopian, and the second part you fly with Garuda, Interline. And that's good because Garuda has additional revenue coming from Ethiopian for seats which probably would have been empty anyway. For Ethiopian it's good because they don't fly to Jakarta, but they can offer seats to Jakarta and filling their seats on their Bangkok flight. So interlining is very important, but you see that full service airlines, they do interlining, while low-cost airlines, they don't do interlining. Do you work together with hotels, with car rental companies? You can get some additional revenue from the commission. If you book through Lion Air for instance, a car rental, Lion Air gets 10 to 20% commission because they bring the customer. It's an extra revenue for the airline, like Lion Air. It's also an easy sell for car rental companies because who else? How can they reach the customer otherwise? So it's a win-win. And then if you're selling your tickets, that's number 6. You can sell them through their own website, which is good. You don't have to pay commissions to travel agents, or you can use to sell it through GSAs, which is general sales agents, like you have here. What's called Traveloka? Is it Traveloka? Yeah, the website. They are linked. Traveloka is linked with GDS. It's a global distribution system, like Amadeus, like Sabre. The airlines put all their fares and their capacity in that GDS, and then Traveloka, they link up with that GDS. They have to pay for it, and on average, about 7 to 8% of your ticket goes to Traveloka, and of that 8%, about half of it goes to the GDS, and half of it is for Traveloka. If you are setting up your own website, then you don't have to pay that 8% because people book directly on your website. And that's one of the reasons why most airlines, not only low-cost airlines, but also full-service airlines, push to book through your website. And something that Garuda is doing really good, they have the app, and they have a very good app. I don't know if you're on the Garuda app. It's a very good app. They send these push messages all the time. And they have a very strong social media team, I think. And if you book through the app or through the website, they don't have to pay commission to the Travelokas or the GDS. So that's also a decision. But if you want people to book through your own website, people have to know you. If you're a startup airline, people don't know you. So you probably in the beginning have to get your customers through a GDS and then through Traveloka and whatever. It's very strong, this GDS, because at the University of Antwerp we have our own travel system. It looks like Traveloka, but it's not Traveloka. I have to type in, I want to fly from Jakarta to Yogyakarta, and the system immediately said, oh, these are all the possibilities, and as I told you, I selected CityLink, but that's a Belgian travel agent. They don't know CityLink at all, but they're linked to a GDS. CityLink is linked to a GDS, and thanks to this GDS, which is a big distribution system, my Belgian university travel agent website is linking up with CityLink. And I bought my ticket, it was 100-something euro. About 8% probably goes to that university travel agent. Half of it goes to GDS, and CityLink gets probably 90 euro out of the 100 of that revenue. So important is how will you sell. On the next slide, please. A few other things we need to discuss. When you talk about operations, will you make connections in your network or will you not do it? Connections is good because you can spread your the multitude of your destinations, but it's tricky operationally. If you only have half an hour to connect, then you need to rush. When I was coming here, I flew through Bangkok. We don't have a direct flight from Brussels to Bangkok. We had to pass Vienna. I had 45 minutes connection time. I had to rush. If I had missed my flight, then Austrian Airlines, the airline with whom I was about to fly, would have to pay me for a hotel. I would probably get my 600 euro. If I can say it's not my fault, it's your fault. And they have to put me on the next flight. And my seat would be empty. So doing connections is good, but it also has certain disadvantages. Whether you focus on cargo, or whether you focus on passengers, or whether you focus on both. If you fly only domestic, probably you only want to fly passengers. If you're a low-cost airline, and you sweat your assets, which means you only have 20 minutes connection time, or 20 minutes turnaround time between the landing and the takeoff, it's not enough to do cargo. Cargo is complicated to get in the aircraft, out of the aircraft. If you fly long haul, you probably need cargo. Otherwise, you will never be profitable. So you need to make certain decisions linked to your business model. Turnaround is very important. If you have 1 hour turnaround between two flights, like Garuda, they have about 45 minutes turnaround. That's good, because you have time to board the passengers, to deboard the passengers, you have time to take the suitcases out, take the suitcases in, to change the catering, you have time to clean the aircraft, and even if there's a little delay for the incoming aircraft, you can catch up. So if you have 45 minutes or 1 hour between two flights, it's good. It's good for your product. What is not good is that you can probably fly less. If you fly 4 flights a day, and you every time wait 1 hour between the flights, if you have only 20 minutes, you can probably squeeze out an extra flight, which means your cost will be lower. So your turnaround times are also very important. That's also the reason why if you look at Lion Air, most of the time they board through stairs. It's cheaper because they don't have to rent this finger, but also people get on and off the aircraft much faster. That's all part of their business model. Fleet choice is very important. If you only have one aircraft type, your cost will be lower. If you look at Ryanair in Europe, they only fly Boeing 737. If you look at Lion Air here, they mainly fly 737. It's cheaper. It's easier. One pilot is sick, you can just call another one and change the pilot. Your cabin crew there's an aircraft delayed, your cabin crew has to change aircraft, they're late, so you can easily take cabin crew that was on a spare to move onto that aircraft. So it gives much more flexibility if you have only one aircraft type. If you like Garuda and you have a whole type of aircraft, it's very complicated. You have Embark, you have 737, you have A320 with CityLink, you have 777, you have A330. Pilots can only have most of the time one license. So if the pilot of A330 is sick, you cannot ask him or her, can you fly 777? They're not allowed to. They probably cannot even fly the 777 because it's completely different. The same with the cabin crew. So it gives much more flexibility and a lower cost if you have only one aircraft type. But you're less flexible if you have only one aircraft type. If you look at Garuda, they have small aircraft, they have big aircraft, they have long distance aircraft, they have medium aircraft. So it's flexibility with a higher cost versus standardization with a lower cost. This is another balance that you need to go for. Very important as well, do you outsource operations, do you insource operations? I see in Indonesia that's not an issue. Most of the operations are insourced. This means Garuda, they have their own ground handling. Lion Air, they have their own ground handling company. If you go to Europe and United States, you see that most of the airlines, they don't do their own ground handling. They don't do their own maintenance. They don't do their own cleaning. They outsource everything because it's cheaper to ask another company to do it than you do it yourself. Of course, if that company goes on strike, you're in trouble. And then, of course, very important, frequent flyer schemes. If you're a full-service airline, often you have a frequent flyer scheme, and then you can collect points, You can get free flights, you can get upgrades, you can have additional luggage, and all of that. So frequent flyer schemes are very important for the full service airlines. For the low-cost airlines in Europe and the United States, there's no frequent flyer scheme. Is there one here for Lion Air? Do you know that? No? There's no frequent flyer? No. Most of the time, low-cost airlines don't have a frequent flyer scheme. Can I have the last slide of the components? Next slide, please. Yeah. So, we've just seen the 10 blocks of the components, and these are all decisions you have to make. We come back to that after the break, where we focus on the different components. But if you look, okay, what business models do there exist? What kind of business model do there exist? And here, you can see that you have 5 types of business models. And for the exercise later this afternoon, you have to choose one. A very typical one is a full service airline. It's like Garuda, like Singapore Airlines, like Malaysia Airlines, full service. And then, if you're a full service airline, which means you give a good service on board, your prices are probably higher, then you still have the choice. Do you focus only on short haul, like you have some full service airlines only focusing on short haul, like Batik, for instance. Batik is a full service airline only flying short haul. Batik doesn't fly to London or to Japan. They fly domestic Indonesia and a bit around to Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and a few important cities around. Or do you mix short haul with long haul, like Singapore Airlines, like Garuda Airlines? They have short haul flights, they have long haul flights, and they combine short haul with long haul flights to connect. Or you have only long haul, like Emirates. Emirates has only long haul flights. They fly London to Dubai, and they fly Dubai to Jakarta. And they connect London with Jakarta through Dubai. So that's a full service airline. There you have 3 possibilities. Or you go to the other side of the spectrum. This is low cost airline, like a Lion Air, like CityLink, like Scoot. They're low cost airline. Most of the low cost airlines only fly short haul. You have 2 exceptions. You have AirAsia X, which you might know. You heard about AirAsia X? They fly Kuala Lumpur to Sydney, for instance, low cost. They fly to Tokyo as well in the low cost. And you have Scoot. Scoot is the Singapore Airlines low cost brand. They have short haul flights. Previously was called I think Jetstar, if I'm right. And they have the low cost long haul Scoot, but everything is called Scoot now. You also have hybrid airlines. Hybrid airlines are airlines which are not low cost and they're not full service. I don't know any example in Asia about a hybrid airline. I know there's one in Europe. It's Aer Lingus. It's the Irish airline. They have a big competition from Ryanair. And they have low cost. They have low cost possibilities. You can book low cost with them. But you can also book full service with them. So the same aircraft, you have business class, you have a full service section where you have a meal and you don't have to pay. And the back of the aircraft is low cost. This is a hybrid airline, we call it. Hybrid, you combine low cost with full fare in the same business model. Very difficult business model to survive because customers don't realize, am I no low cost or am I full service? Lion Air Group is doing that very, very smart. Lion Air Group has got 3 business models in one airline, in one airline group. They have the low cost with Lion Air, they have the full service with Batik, and they have the focus strategy with the Super Air Jet, where they focus on the millennials. Very smart. And they even have a regional, Lion Air, I forgot the name. Is that Wings? The regional aircraft? That flies from Bali to Lombok, for instance. They have like the propeller. You don't know? Never heard of? What is it called? Wings?
I don't know.
Wings, yeah. That's a regional. Because you can also go for a regional airline. Regional airline typically connects small islands, you know, with this turboprop aircraft like you see. Antwerp there, they only have one aircraft in Antwerp. They fly to London, there and back, but they're bankrupt now. Wizz Air on the top left is a low-cost carrier in Europe, and Swiss is a full-service carrier. And in Europe specifically, a bit less in the US, you have leisure carriers, as I told you before. These are carriers which focus specifically on tourists, and they specifically fly to tourist destinations. Because big airlines before were not interested in these tourist destinations. Can I have the next slide, please? So this just gives some brands about what are the typical business models. And full service airlines, of course, you have the whole list of big airlines like Garuda, Singapore, and all the American airlines. Low cost, you probably see Scoot, AirAsia, CityLink, Lion Air, or typical low cost carriers from here. What you see in Asian countries, which are upcoming, low cost is doing quite well. In India, for instance, you have Indigo. Indigo is a low-cost carrier, and they're doing quite well because people switch from bus and car to low cost, and later on they switch from low cost to full service if their income is increasing. Then you have the hybrid carriers, which combine low cost and full service. You have some leisure carriers, and of these three, which you see there, quite surprisingly, following Corona, of these three, this one went bankrupt, Thomas Cook, and Monarch went bankrupt as well. So we only have TUI Fly left. It's a German carrier. They're also quite strong in Belgium. And then you have, of course, the regional airlines, where you can see, there you see Wings Air. Not Wings Air, that's the regional. But you also have CityJet and Hop in Europe. Regional airlines are not very common in Europe. Because we don't have many remote islands and all of that. A little bit in the north, in Sweden and Finland. A little bit in the south. We have some islands in Spain and in Italy. Here, the regional airlines are much more significant. So these are the different business models that exist. Do you understand the concept of business model? Yeah? Okay? You do understand? Yes. Good. What is Malaysia Airlines? Full service. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, can I have the next slide? You can also make another distinction, and this comes from a paper from the Boston Consulting Group, and I also like that analysis. And on the x-axis, you see the average distance they fly. No, stage length is the average distance you fly. So here you really fly short haul, and here you fly long haul. Short haul is typically 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, and from here, medium haul is 5-6 hours, and then 10-12 hours is long haul. On the x-axis you see the average stage length. And on the y-axis you see the level of service. This here is very basic service, almost no service, and the top is really very, very good service. And what you can see is that airlines which are successful in the world are the ones who fly short haul and have a very low basic service. These are the low-cost carriers, and the carriers that give a very good service and that fly on average long haul. They're doing quite well. What you see is that long haul, low cost, is a very difficult business model. There happen to be these two here. XL Airways is a French low-cost long-haul carrier. Norwegian is a Norwegian low-cost long-haul carrier. They're both bankrupt since a couple of years, even pre-corona. They're already bankrupt. What you also see is that short haul and high service is also a very difficult business model. You look at Air Berlin, they really struggle. Alitalia, they're bankrupt. SAS is bankrupt, has been reset. LOT, they are struggling. Brussels Airlines in Belgium, they were struggling. So that's also a very difficult part. And this is a little bit better. So it shows either you have to fly short haul with low cost, with basic service, or you have to fly longer haul. It means medium and long haul on average with a high service. These are the two successful business models, and all the rest of the business models, they are struggling. Can I have the next slide, please? No, I'm not going to talk about that. Next slide. So remember the business model canvas I have just shown to you? With the different components in there. If you fill it out, it's very basic for a low-cost carrier, but this is just very basic. Then the value proposition in the middle is very clearly, I give a basic service, but I don't ask much money. I give value for money, means you get little value for little money, but if you're very price sensitive, you have to fly me, because I offer a good, safe product without any frills. If you want something more, then you have to pay for it. That's their value proposition. They have very strong partnerships with rentals, with hotels, with insurance. I saw yesterday when I booked my CityLink, oh my God, I was coming crazy. You want pickup from the airport? No. You want insurance? No. Are you sure you want insurance? No, I don't want insurance. You want to pay for your seat? Yes, I want to pay for my seat. You want to pay this seat or that seat? I want that seat. They keep on asking, do you want a hotel? No, I don't want a hotel. So they really make money from this additional revenues. The seat that goes into their pocket, the car rental pickup, they get commission for doing that. They have a very low cost structure, which means they have a single aircraft fleet, which reduces their training costs, which reduces their maintenance costs, which reduces their operational costs. So they fly to cheap airports, mainly. I know in Indonesia there's not really a distinction between cheap airports and expensive airports. If you go to Europe, every big city has a cheap airport. You have Brussels Airport, which is full service, and you can go to Brussels South, which is the cheap one. You go to London, you have London Heathrow, which is the expensive airport. You can go to London Stansted, which is the cheap airport. The same with Barcelona, the same with Frankfurt. So all the big cities have a second, a bit like Haii here. That's the cheap, it's Haii, no? It's Haii. Haii Airport is the cheap airport. If you want to fly cheap, you fly Haii. They mainly aim budget travelers. If you are a low-cost carrier, you aim budget travelers, people who have a high price sensitivity. And then you try to grasp as much as possible additional revenues through these car rentals. And they're very smart. They do not only fly to cheap airports, they also have quick turnaround times. 20 minutes. They land everyone out, suitcases out, new people in, new suitcases in 20 minutes, max. And by doing this, they can fly maybe 1 or 2 extra flights during that day. Instead of being 1 hour on the ground, they only stay 20 minutes. That's also a reason why most of these short-haul activities are typical low-cost activities. And where do they get money from? From tickets and, of course, additional revenues. And if you look at low-cost carriers, on average, they get 30%, even some airlines 50% of their revenues from other activities than the tickets. Can I have the next slide, please? This shows the rise of the low-cost carriers, and you see that Europe is by far the most important one. It's not too much up to date, but the graph still goes up. In Europe, we have about 45% of all passengers are on low cost. If you look at Asia Pacific, they're still running a bit behind, but if you look domestically, the low cost model in Japan, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, low cost model, I don't have the figures, is by far the most important business model for the low cost, for domestic flights. China, they don't have low cost carriers. They have one, it's called Spring Airlines, but they don't fly a lot. The majority of the domestic flights are full service in China. If you look at India, the majority of the flights are low cost. So, you have a question? No? No, you can have.
Later on.
Later, okay. So Asia Pacific is catching up. On the domestic scene, they are definitely catching up. They're even bigger than Europe. On the international flights, you still see that the standard agreements, because there are no open skies, there's no deal to be an Indonesian carrier. But it's not an Indonesian carrier. They're cheating. They look for an Indonesian company who takes 51% of the shares, but in reality, it's AirAsia that's running the show. But the Indonesian company has the right to fly inside Indonesia. If you're a Malaysian company, you don't have the right to fly inside Indonesia. So you have to set up AirAsia Indonesia. The same in Japan. You have AirAsia Japan. The owner is 51% a Japanese company. In reality, it's just a strawman. It's just AirAsia who is running the show. In Europe, it's very possible that an Irish company flies between France and Germany. So that deregulation will really give a boost to the international operations here in Asia Pacific. Can I have the next slide? That's maybe a bit too detailed. Can I have the next slide after this? We've been talking all the time about passengers, but let's talk about freight. Freight is also important, also for passenger airlines, especially for the full-service long-haul airlines. As I just said, for freight, in the new aircraft type, 787, A350, you can add about 30 tons of freight. If you know the fare is between $1 and $5 a kilogram, that's lots of money that's being added onto your bottom line by transporting freight. You also have different business models. Typical business model is the old cargo airline, like Cargolux. They have 15 747s, they only have freighter aircraft, they only transport freight. And they just have a schedule, and they really focus on cargo, and they do that quite successfully. Second is combination airlines. Remember this morning, if you combine passengers with freight, like British Airways, like Garuda Indonesia, like Singapore Airlines, you're a combination airline. Even if you have freighters, but you also have passengers. And half of the freight is transported on board of passenger aircraft. The third business model are integrators. Think about FedEx, UPS, DHL, SF Express, they're integrators. As I said this morning, they do not only fly from airport to airport, they take care of the whole process. They pick it up from your door and they deliver it to the end customer. And they also do the flying. And because they have the whole activity chain in their own hands, they can deliver a very good service, and they can deliver a full trace and track, and they can be very fast. If I'm in Belgium and I want to send a document to Trisakti, our cooperation agreement, to be signed, I can send it with FedEx, and I can send it on a Monday morning, and it arrives here on Tuesday afternoon, because it's a very seamless service. If you have an urgent machinery part from Japan, and I need it urgently here in Jakarta, you can order it today from Japan, and it will be here in front of the door tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, if I pay for it. And they take care of the flight between Tokyo and Jakarta, but they're also going to pick it up from the Japanese company. They do the customs clearance, it arrives here in Jakarta, they do the customs clearance, and they bring it to the front door here. All in one chain. These are the integrators. Very successful business model, very profitable, and there's also a big consolidation because you only have about 3 of them left. And last but not least, a bit strange, the forwarders. Forwarders are typically asset light. Forwarders are typically the middleman between the company and the airline, and they take some commission, or they take a margin on top of the airline fee, and they take care of customs clearance and maybe the trucking to pick it up and do all the paperwork. But some forwarders, like Panalpina, for instance, they have their own freight. And I can also add a fifth one, which is a new business model. Some maritime companies like MSC, like CMA CGM, like Maersk, they earned so much money during the corona times with their ships, they started their own airline. CMA CGM, they have about 10 aircraft. MSC, they have about 6 aircraft. Maersk ordered about 10 aircraft. So they do maritime shipping, but they also are doing some air. So I could add a fifth one, but I don't add it yet because I don't believe that business model is sustainable. Can I have the next slide? This just gives some additional reading. I will just ask the team, don't run off. I didn't put it on the, let's say, on the screen. I have, before the break, some special business models. And I'm going to show it to you. If I give this, can you project it? Yes. Are you still there? Asleep? Tired? No? No. Okay. I did not put this on for you, but I just wanted to show to you. There's some unusual business models which didn't work out. And it's bad inspiration, because after the break, we do some exercise. And you have to make your own business model. You have to make your own airline. And don't choose this type of business model, because it's not working. If you look at the next slide, let's talk about business model. Yeah, one more slide, please. You have Pet Airways. That's an airline in the United States. They focus only on pets in the US. They, you can also have a look at that. They called the pet attendants, for instance, and they fly these dogs and cats, because in the US, you know, people love their cat, love their dog. It's not always allowed to transport the dogs on board of the aircraft, and they have this Pet Airways which flies. But it's bankrupt. On the next slide, you can see a bit more information. How much it cost was between $150 and $1,500, $1,200. They call them pet attendants. If you look at the website, it's still active, but they are not flying anymore. They are bankrupt. So Pet Airways, if you go for Pet Airways, it's not going to work. Yeah. Next one is Wouter's Air. There's a little bit haram, so I put a square over it. If you have been in the US, you have a bar there, and it's called Wouter's. And Wouter's is typically a boys' bar, where you have this kind of attendants, which are very scantily dressed, and they are just serving drinks, mainly to men, making fun, you know how Americans are. And they set up, yes, they set up their own airline. They call Wouter's Air, and they at the top of they had almost 10 aircraft with Wouter's Air. Very focused. They had this type of cabin attendants, I think they had to be A or B size, I think, or D, in order to fly was Wouter's Air. But it went bankrupt. On the next slide, you can see the whole story if you move one slide. I know you like the picture, but if you want to move. The boys in the back like the picture, no? Yeah. Oh, they keep it private now. Wouter's Air was not successful. It went bankrupt as well after a while. So that was not a big success. Yeah, here we are again. If you go down one slide, I know you really like the slide, but good. The president watches this side, huh? No, this side. Here she's back. No, boys, she's not going to be alive if you push. If that picture keeps on being there, I will not be allowed to come anymore, no? So, let's see what's... Of course, they were focusing a lot. Does work?
There is some error.
Error in the slide?
Yes, you can do the next one.
Yeah, if you can do the next slide, that's fine. Yeah, I have just 3 more business models I want to show you. Business models that don't work. Just a second, I will just see. So you can see that airline stopped in 2006 because it was not successful. The next airline, if you move to the next slide, is the Lord's Airline. You know, in the United States, they were a big community of Jewish people. And they wanted to set up flights to Jerusalem from New York. You know, New York is the place where the highest number of Jewish live outside Israel. The second hub with the highest number of Jewish people is Belgium. In Antwerp, we have a very big community of Jewish people. And these Jewish people are the Hasidic Jewish people, and they are very strict in their rules. So there was a guy setting up the Lord's Airline with flights to Jerusalem. On board, no alcohol, only religious songs. In-flight entertainment was their Torah only. It didn't work out. They just had one aircraft, but it just flew a few times and then it went bankrupt. So this shows you need to target your customer group, but if you focus too much, then of course you exclude people. So non-religious people would never fly. Would never fly the Lord's Airline. That's why Qatar Airlines, that's why Emirates, they are Arab airlines. But they know if they focus too much on pushing the people and not having alcohol and all of that, then they would probably lose a number of customers. So they are quite dogmatic in saying, or pragmatic to say, okay, we serve champagne for the business class, we serve beer, we serve wine. Even if it's against our religion, we still do it because we can attract customers. So that's the Lord Airline. On the next slide, you see a little bit more explanation. But in the end, in 1987, it went bankrupt. They didn't get their license. Another one, we go to the next slide, is Smokers Express and Smint Air. Right? You see on the next slide. In the US and in Europe, since the end of the 90s, you're not allowed to smoke on board anymore. To you, it maybe sounds normal, but at the time it was a big drama. I can remember when I was traveling with my parents, they always arrived late at the airport, so we had to sit in the smoker section of the aircraft, and there were people were smoking around you. Absolutely terrible. What happened? FAA, before Europe, they said no more smoking on board of the aircraft. In Europe, 1994, no more smoking on board. Asia, even a little bit later. And what did they do? There was a guy saying that I will make Smokers International Air, SMINT Air, Smokers International Air. You were allowed to smoke on board, and they did a trick, because smoking was allowed, and is still allowed, in private jets, or when you're a member of a club. So they say, if you book with SMINT Air, you get a card, valid for 1 year, it costs you $20, and then you're a member of the club. And then you can smoke on board of the flight. So you see, this was smoke air, everyone was smoking. They were mainly flying initially to Germany and to Japan. Germany and Japan, they have the highest number of smokers in the world. Indonesia, by the way, has one of the highest amount of smokers as well. With the males, but almost no female is smoking. You have the lowest rate for female smoking, but the highest rate for males smoking. Very strange to have that difference. There must be a cultural difference. Any of the boys smoke here? No? Few? Few? Yeah? No? Any of the girls smoke? No? Yes? You know girls smoke? In Belgium, more girls than men are smoking. Because they think they get slim by smoking, which is not true, because you die. So SMINT Air, they were quite successful in the beginning. They fly to Düsseldorf, which has a good link. They fly then also to Tokyo, also to Germany and to Tokyo. But in the end, it went bankrupt. So you have to pay $25, but it didn't work in the end. On the next slide, you can see the story. It didn't work. So can I have the next slide? And then last but not least, you have MGM Grand Air. You know, MGM is the entertainment company. They do movies, but they also have casino. They have the biggest casino in Las Vegas. You know Las Vegas, gambling?
Yeah.
It's very haram, no? Very haram, yeah. So don't do it. But Americans love it. And they love doing this type of gambling. And of course, you know, when you do gambling, you always lose. No? It's statistics. You always lose, statistically. So the more money you spend, the more chance you lose and the higher amount you lose. So what these big companies like MGM love is to attract rich people. And they set up this MGM Grand Air. They have this aircraft, look how nice inside, in order to attract rich customers who would fly in from Orlando, from Miami, from Las Vegas, from New York, from Boston, from Washington. They had about 8 aircraft, and they were flying, as you can see, from LA, from New York, flying this type of aircraft in order to attract. They went bankrupt in the end because private jets were becoming more and more important in the US, so they went bankrupt in the end. So on the next slide, you see some more explanation. So just to wrap up here, a business model. You can go to the next slide. A business model, and then we have a break. A business model is the heart of your company. You need to have a good business model. And what's that business model say? Very important. What's your value proposition? How do you differentiate yourself compared to your competition? Or your lower cost, or your higher service, or maybe combination between the two. How do you make sure that you're distinguished as different? How can you make sure that people actually go for your product? And once you have your value proposition, you have to think of it, how I'm going to do it, what organization will I set up? Then you have people, processes, systems, and you have assets, because you still have to deliver your product or your service. And you also have to determine, okay, to who am I going to sell my product? If I'm a low-cost airline, I want to sell it to the There are customers who are very price sensitive. If I'm a high service airline with a good product, I want to sell it at a high rate to the more rich, wealthy customers. You also have to determine where am I going to sell, to which markets I'm going to sell. If you're an airline, you always fly there and back. So if you fly between Jakarta and Bangkok, you do not only have to cater for the Indonesian people here, but you also need to attract Thai people to come with your airline, to come to Indonesia. So the customer focus and the geographical focus is, of course, very important there. So, this is the business model. We've seen the business model canvas, which gives a little bit the different boxes you have to determine. It will help you as a guidance to develop your business model. So, what I propose is that we have a break now. We come back at 3:10, and then we do the exercise and we start the project work. Okay? Thank you for your attention.
Tadi tuh bisa jadi referensi. Itu yang tadi loh, yang si Lion tadi.
Ya, sama-sama.
Gue nanya keseringan.
Gue mau tidur dulu dah.
Itu yang Lion kan dia tuh naro harga kan kalau misalnya
Udah bikin bisnis modelnya yang low cost. Kenapa aku nggak gitu dong? Dia bilang the margin is low, tapi kita bakal stable. Iya tahu.
Oh, dia bisa murah karena kita banyak goyang.
ya dia ngebuksidnya banyak, tapi sedangkan si apa namanya pesawat ini belum ada, tapi dia berani buat ngebuksidnya banyak dengan harga yang murah. Itu
Salah satu yes aja bilang katanya mereka ngebuk Lion sepenuh satu sama cuman gimana mereka berani karena sabar itu bukan Lion, itu salah satu travel agent yang ngebuk si Lion itu karena misalnya kayak lu bantu 10 lu bandel 50 lu kan kalau satu orang lebih murah.
grosir ya saya.
Dia kalau gue sih lebih ke arah apa namanya travel agent ya, karena kalau saya asli itu harus perlu buksit dia tahu.
Iya, maksudnya gue pernah dengar gini loh. Jadi kan sebelum di airline sih pesawatnya ready, terus mau terbang nih.
Lu muncul di sini gitu.
Dulu dong.
Yang kayak integratornya
Coba deh.
kemarin gue juga paham itu, gue ingat banget dia katain dia ngomong sama Parito atau apa gitu, dia ngomong lagi. Iya.
Iya ya, Parituan ya.
Itu langsung dibahas di mana-mana. Itu karena emang
batangnya.
Apa namanya? Oh iya, kalau ngebandel tuh mendingan. Karena kalau ngeliat dari ekspektasi perusahaan itu kan lu mampu.
Ya, jadi gue bilang gitu.
Masuk.
Gue lihat.
Gue liat lagi jauh serius nih dari tadi. Halo kakak-kakak, selamat datang di ITL Trisakti. Halo. Halo.
Daripada
Instagramnya? Jangan sebut Instagram gue lah. Janganlah, Mr. Mac. Main bola. Dan spill IG lah, bahaya lah. Gue kan IG gue gak punya gawein IG ya.
Kok sulit banget. Gimana caranya sih kita bisa kayak apa ya, balance antara offering low cost carrier sama insight-nya kayak apa
yang belum.
Halo guys, buat kalian yang belum isi absen, boleh langsung segera ke belakang ya buat isi absen yang buat yang belum aja.
Run the fuck so much. I'm trying to fuck you some.
Bocah di mana-mana, di sini ya noda anjing keren gua. Bocah malam hijau tiba-tiba kuning. Yang hitam tiba-tiba putih. Tai-dai.
Tai-dai.
Lu mah tai. Tai-dai.
Partner sama perusahaan biar mereka lebih ngebus si profitnya itu.
Yang ini bukan yang ada merah-merahnya.
Kim.
Nes, hari ini diskus aja kan? Atau kita ada ngumpulin juga?
Nggak tahu kak, itu dia. Tapi katanya ada sama tas gitu. Mungkin tasnya kayak tadi kita kan bikin grup terus bikin bisnis model kanvas. Itu lah kayak milih. Kita nggak ngerti sih.
Nggak ngomong. Siap.
Iya. Lu nggak di mic ya kayak gue tadi. Oh,
Ini kekuatan rakyatnya.
consolidation.
Translogician itu bergerak ini basicnya gini ya, tadi kan dari misalkan Delta Airlines, misalkan si Delta itu akuisisi beberapa airlines, jadi kayak dia ngasih ada beberapa airlines yang lainnya itu banyak cuma kan semuanya bisa survive, kasih Delta Airlines akhirnya dari itu mereka pertama bergabung dengan Delta Airlines itu nah cuma ada basicnya akuisisi sama
Delta. Itu punya Delta gitu.
ya
Part of Delta.
masuk ke dalam unsur Delta dan basicnya ya udah sudah ada itu kan ya Delta simpelnya gitu, jadi kayak dia ngambil ya misalkan si Delta itu ngambil ya kayak ngambil grupnya si apalah punya ya ngambil grupnya terus kan kayak ngomong kayak aircraft dia ngambil terus grup communication team yang di dalam dia sudah akuisisi kan akuisisi kan
Tapi mereka udah pasti bangkrut itu udah pasti nggak bakalan survive gitu. Apa si Delta nggak bantuin dia buat survive?
mereka udah nggak sabar karena mereka udah dibeli jadi mereka bankrupt lebih sih tapi di airline itu ada yang nggak kuat gitu segala macam bayar utangnya segala macam kayak Garuda akhirnya dibayar
Mana kalau consolidation itu
iya
terhalang, iya maksudnya kayak terhalang peraturan orang kayak peraturan kayak regional kayak peraturan bapak perhubungan penerbangan katanya airline dari luar negeri nggak boleh ke Indonesia. Kita banyak consolidation sama airline Indonesia.
Emang boleh?
Transit. Sebenarnya kayak customer gue di Jakarta nih, tapi apa menteri lu ngasih peraturan gue nggak boleh ke tempat lu. Gimana kalau lu ke gua harus gitu loh.
lo dengerin lu biasa bayar di biasa General Transport itu jualan doang kalau biasa itu kayak semacam kayak gua bokap gua biasa basicnya mau jual gitu tersebut itu ngaruh di sistem gimana
Who's the person in charge?
macam itu aku udah apa lah kita masukin ke dalam sistem CSA ini itu jadi biasanya semua airline yang ada di CSA itu bisa dimasukin ke travel locker dengan tepat gitu ya jadi tepat jadi mereka tinggal masukin doang nih jadi udah masuk ke kantornya gitu tapi kayak apa ya
intermediaris ya
third party
On the next slide, if you give me the next slide, you see we're going to talk about project. Every day, there are 5 days in total, every day there's one project that has to be done. And you will see your business plan will also grow and grow. By Friday afternoon, you will have a very good and clear business plan. If you just work during the days, and maybe you still have to do some work in the evening, but then you will have your business plan. On the next slide. Yeah, maybe the next slide as well. It didn't work. I see I don't have a license for Indonesia. Just an exercise now. Hainan Airlines. Hainan Airlines is an airline based on the island of Hainan in China. They serve meals on board of the aircraft. They give a good service on board the aircraft. They fly short haul, domestic, inside China. They fly long haul. They fly to Brussels, for instance, from Shanghai, from Beijing, from Shenzhen. They transport cargo, they transport passengers. If you go on the next slide, please. Maybe one down again. Yeah. So, according to you, are they a full-service network carrier, or are they a low-cost carrier, or are they a regional carrier, a leisure carrier, or a hybrid carrier? Who thinks A? No one. Who thinks A? Full service. No one? Who thinks B? What do you think? Full service. What do you think?
Hybrid.
Why hybrid? Why is it a hybrid?
I think they serve low-cost carriers as well.
But they also have full service on it.
Yeah. It could be a hybrid carrier, but it's not. If you go on the next slide, it's a full service carrier. These are the votes from last year, actually. It's a full service carrier. Maybe you didn't know. You're right. They also serve low-cost passengers, but they still do that within the full service context. So everyone gets a meal. You don't have to pay for the suitcase, so it's a full service carrier. Next slide, please. Air Asia. That's quite easy. They have the slogan, the home of the low fare, although everyone can fly. They fly mainly only A320, standardized. You have to pay for suitcase, hand luggage, for meals on board. They mainly fly short haul, out of Kuala Lumpur, but also out of Jakarta, out of Bali, out of Vietnam, Tokyo, and so on. On the next slide, I'll let you guess. Is it a full service carrier for short haul? Is it a low cost carrier, or is it a hybrid? Hybrid? Do you think? Low cost? Low cost? Why is it a hybrid? Hybrid between low cost and?
Everyone can fly. Everyone can fly.
If you go to the next slide, it's a low cost. It's not a hybrid. It only focuses. You could be right saying it's a hybrid because they do connections. Low-cost carriers normally don't do connections, but because in Asia you don't have the law that if you delay you have to pay money, they dare to do connections. Nowadays, you have lots of people flying from Banda Aceh or Medan to Jakarta to Kuala Lumpur because it's cheaper. They don't have this minimum price rule. So they do some connections within their network. Next slide. AirAsia X. AirAsia X flies long haul. They have very low fares. They fly from Kuala Lumpur to Sydney to Tokyo, maybe Asian destinations. You have to pay for meals, you have to pay for suitcases, for everything. But they have a business class, which is quite good in front of the aircraft, and they take some cargo. So on the next slide, I ask you, is it a full service carrier, long haul? Is it a low cost carrier? Long haul? Is it a hybrid carrier, long haul, or is it an older?
Hybrid.
Hybrid? And why hybrid?
Because they have business class and other classes.
Yeah. Hybrid could be a good solution, but if you go on the next slide, hybrid is indeed the correct answer because they have cargo, because they have business class. They do connections. You can fly with AirAsia X from Jakarta. You fly AirAsia to Kuala Lumpur, and then you connect them to the local. So it has all the features of low cost, but also some features of full service. You could also have said low cost, long haul. That would also be correct, but hybrid carrier is a bit more correct. Next slide. JetBlue. JetBlue flights out of New York. New York is their hub. They have a very good business class, the Mint business class. And at the back of the aircraft, they have a very low fare segment. You have to pay for everything, but you have free in-flight entertainment. And they do connections between different destinations in the United States, and they connect to JFK, which is a terrible airport to connect. So on the next slide, you see the questions. In full service, short and medium haul, is it a low-cost carrier, short and medium haul? Is it a hybrid carrier, short and medium, or is it something else? Hybrids? Yeah? And why? Hybrid between?
Something else.
Between low cost and low cost and full service, but it could also be something else. If you go to the next slide. Hybrid is the correct, but it could be something else. And what else could it be? What else? You said. What else? Yeah.
I thought it was leisure. I think leisure carrier.
Yeah, that's a very good answer from the smart young man. It could be a leisure carrier as well, because they mainly fly to leisure destinations out of JFK. They fly to all the Caribbean islands. They fly to all the Mexican destinations, all the holiday destinations from where all the Americans like to go. So other could also be correct, but we see it mainly as a hybrid carrier, hybrid between low cost and between full service. Next slide. I think that's the last one. Emirates. They have the fantastic first class, which looks very Arab, with the gold and the woods and all of that. They have a very good business class as well. They have a good economy class, but they also serve cheap. If my students in Antwerp come from Indonesia or Malaysia, often they fly Emirates, and they say, yeah, it's the cheapest option. The cheapest to fly Emirates. So, if you go on the next slide, you can ask, are they full service carrier long haul? Or they full service carrier with mixed operations? Or they low cost carrier long haul? Or is it a mix of above? What do you think? B, full service mixed operations. Yeah, mixed operations mean short haul and long haul. Yeah, what do you think? Mixed, you think mixed as well? Yeah. On the next slide, you can see the answer. It's like a mix of everything.
Mix of the above.
But here nothing is wrong. If you say it's a full service carrier, long haul, you're right. Because if the cheapest ticket, you get a meal on board, you can have your suitcase. So in a way, it's a full service carrier, and they only fly long haul. But they also have some mixed operation. They fly A380 to Doha. 1 hour flight, they fly a wide body aircraft to Doha. They fly to Riyadh 7 times a day, A380. So it's a bit mixed operation. You could also say they're a kind of low cost carrier. Not really everywhere, but they have a very cheap product. They sell their tickets very, very cheap. So in a way, you could say it's a mix of the above. I think that's the last one. If you move one more slide, we have one more or not? No. These logos that you see behind me are the logos from last year. We did this exercise, and your predecessors set up their own airlines, and these are the airlines they made. You can see there were in total 8 airlines they made, and it's very, very great business models. I will send you tomorrow some examples from the groups from last year, that you can have some inspiration, that you can see what the groups have done. On the next slide, please, you'll see the assignment. And what's the assignment? You have to make a presentation. So you have to make a presentation with the different parts which you see behind me you have to present. And the first thing you have to present is in which region do you base yourself and what business model will you be. And now you have to discuss on the next slide. I will also send this around. So we have in fact five sessions in total. On the next slide, you can see the assignment. I want you to do first and then second. Today in your group, I first want you to decide on the name of your airline and make a logo for your airline. But more important is you agree where will be your home base and which region will you serve. Don't think about destination, think about the region. Will you be a domestic airline in Indonesia? You want to be a regional airline in Indonesia, serving Indonesia and maybe the surrounding countries? Or you want to be an airline in Europe, serving Europe? Or you want to be an intercontinental airline flying between Asia and Europe? So very important, first the name, then a home base, then which region you're going to serve, and then the type of carrier. You want to be a carrier which flies long haul, which flies short haul only. You want to focus on the lower cost segment. And that's very important. You think about your business model. I mean, which business model do you go for? You go for full service, you go for low cost, you go for hybrid, and then we have the business model canvas. You have to fill out every box. Remember, we have done 10 different decisions you have to make, these 10. And I ask you, by tomorrow, if you send the logo and the name and logo, do you have your email address? Is it on the slide, your email address? You create a slide. Perfect, good. I will send these slides in a second. We send them around in the group, these slides. And is yours behind? Or? It's a separate slide. Oh wow, I've been different to this. Yeah. Okay. So send the logo to this email address, and then by tomorrow morning, 8:45 latest, I need to have the logo and the name, and I also like you to have decided on these items. Yeah. Okay. I will PDF this now and I will send it around to everyone. Then you have the assignment. In the meantime, I think we leave. You all have the email address? Yeah. And there you see the questions. Okay? So you have 1 hour time now. I will walk around to help you if necessary. And we normally stop at 1:30.
Oh iya kan
Tadi motonya di berapa? Dia nggak lokal.
Kan gue sekarang mau rejoin mana? Home base di mana? Gue nggak mau bisa bantu gue.
Kalau mik, iya kalau mik, bukan aku mau short long habis itu.
biar valuable juga, biar apa ya, kayak kita tuh dibutuhin orang baik loh. Ananda Salwa.
Biasanya